Hello everyone and welcome back to AMOS, our course on Agile methods and open source. In the previous lecture I introduced Agile methods, how it came about as a reaction to plan-driven software development. I also introduced the key functions of software development or engineering organizations, and in this lecture I will present Scrum in overview and how the key functions are played by different people. Now, when I say Scrum, I talk about the process practices that we use in the AMOS project. We actually also enhance Scrum with extreme programming practices, which are engineering practices. They complement each other nicely. They all follow an agile mindset. So Scrum is an agile method, one of several, but the dominant one these days, and was invented in the 90s, a comparatively simple agile method. It also is a rugby situation of intense collaboration. You can see the folks here pushing against each other. That's supposedly where the name Scrum comes from. For us here again, it's a software development model, a process model, more of a framework really that gets instantiated in different ways, depending on the context or situation, whether a company or university. The Scrum definition, interestingly enough, is independent of software development. It didn't have anything to do with software development when it started out, but in software it's where it really took root. I'm not sure it really took root elsewhere, but it worked nicely in software. Scrum, therefore, lets us plan our project process, and it has a particular scope in mind. Scrum gives us the methods, ideas to cope with releasing a product or project to a market, project to clients, a single one. Scrum doesn't have anything to say about a portfolio, so I grade out the planning, the management scope of portfolio, because Scrum doesn't quite tell us much about it, anything about it. So the scope is product, that's the overall thing. Within a product you have releases, a sequence of releases. Scrum, as adapted by many consultants to software development, tells us some things about releases, and then about sprints, the time box that has a release, but also where many sprints chained lead to project or product releases. And then even smaller, you have day-based process scope or day planning. Here's how the overall process in Scrum looks like. It's this sequence of time boxes or iterations that are specifically called sprints in Scrum, where each sprint consists of planning, execution, review, release, retrospective. So at the smallest level, it's this PE3R, make up one sprint. Then you have a sequence of sprints which taken together constitute a project or product release. And then at the highest level, you have a sequence of project or product releases of a longer term time horizon than the time box that is a sprint. So some practical figures are a 1 week or 2 week sprint. And then you have maybe 12 or 6 of those, and then a quarter is over and you have a quarterly release of your project or product. Scrum, like most agile methods, lends itself to regular delivery, whatever the status of the software, meaning you plan by time. So you say, after 1 week, the sprint is finished, we'll do a sprint release. After 3 months, the project release should be cut, and that's when we deliver software, whatever is in there in terms of functionality. So going back to the magic triangle, what it means is, as always, cost is fixed. You have a fixed team. Then you fix time, and hence you have a particular time goal in mind. Then Scrum always says, deliver always at the same high quality level. Then as a consequence, scope is not defined. Scope follows from you saying we have a regular delivery rhythm at a high quality, the team is fixed, then the scope is what varies. and you can't predict it. It's determined for you by your choice of quality and time deadlines. So when we talk about process models and now Scrum, we need to talk about the roles people play, the practices they perform in these roles, and the artifacts, the work output they generate. The roles are the ones you already know: product owner, software developer, Scrum Master. Those are the committed roles. Then practices like day planning, sprint review, and so forth. And the artifacts are the code, product backlog, sprint backlog, and so forth. The key Scrum roles, again, are product owner, software developer, and Scrum Master. These are the so-called committed roles that Scrum defines for you, where committed means they are in the project. Not committed, just involved, are customers, marketing managers, other business functions, say inside a company that applies Scrum. This naming committed versus involved comes from a pretty bad joke about the pig and the rooster, or the hen, where the hen says to the pig, "Let's start a restaurant, and I will deliver the eggs and you will deliver the bacon." Obviously not a vegetarian restaurant. And hence the pig says, "Oh no, you would be involved, you would only be involved, dear hen, I would be committed." Meaning the hen gives eggs, gives eggs but doesn't lose a leg. The pig loses the leg for the bacon. Okay. Product owner, the first of the key 3 roles defined in the Scrum process. Approach to software development. Has overall responsibility for the product being developed. That's what the Scrum guide says. In reality, inside a company, maybe there will probably be strategic product managers, and product owners are often more technical. Product managers, meaning they get to work on a product, they specify the detailed requirements in a product backlog, they don't necessarily write the business plan for the product. But it can vary. So if the product owner is everything, strategic product manager and technical product manager, then indeed they probably wrote the business plan, and then they're also responsible for codifying, writing down the product vision and the detailed product requirements. The product owner in Scrum also plans and the development, in the sense of that they prioritize features. So they don't tell people what to do, but they provide the input of what has to be done. That's the key product management task or product owner task. And then also looks at progress. So here are the key areas of responsibility, combining in this case product management, or turning product management into what the product owner does. At the highest level, if they are really a strategic product manager as well, they write the business plan, they assess the market opportunity, and then they write a business plan and write a product specification and so forth. And then they also work with engineering, so they write down the requirements, details in a product backlog, sit in and manage in part the Scrum meetings, the sprint planning and so forth, and they track the progress. So a lot of work for a product owner, very powerful if they are actually given this whole power. So you can see how when you look at these traditional functions of, product management, either strategic or technical or both, but then also prioritization, planning, tracking of progress, that's what an engineering manager does. A product owner does it all, or is supposed to know it all. So it's a very powerful position, requires a broad set of skills. So it's a traditional job of product manager and engineering manager get mapped to a product owner in the scope of a Scrum team. And here we have the classic processes again that you already know from product management. They are now leading to specifically named artifacts, product vision, not MRD or PRD, because In Scrum, there's only a product vision, very short summary of what is supposed to be done, a product backlog, and so forth. I really think it's important to understand the potential conflict between what traditional product managers do and what a Scrum product owner is. And in my book, or in my experience, product owners rarely write the original business plan. They are really not strategic product managers in most cases. If anything, they are technical product managers. They still need to understand the business value. They still need to know why they are doing what they are doing. But they are still separate from what a strategic product manager does. So a company, in particular a vendor, obviously then has strategic product managers, or maybe one, and then if they have multiple products, maybe different product owners for each product. But the Scrum product owner does not write the business plan usually. Scrum is a framework, so there will be other roles. This is a key, really important role to fill. Then in Scrum, there is no engineering manager, there are only software developers. So the software developers as a team, so there are plenty, while there's only, ideally there are several to get more work done, but there's only one product owner. So maybe you have 5, maybe you have 7. I think starting at 10, you have too many. A Scrum team, in terms of developers, the sweet spot is 5 to 8. So the software development team, by way of the individual software developers, but then as a team, has the responsibility of delivering the actual software. They are supposed to be, hopefully they are, empowered to make their own decisions. They define the architecture. There is no chief architect, at least within Scrum, which could tell them how the software has to look like, which platforms to use, what architecture to have, and so forth. So the software developers are empowered, they make all the important design decisions, they implement the feature in their own chosen architecture. They also support planning and tracking of planning with the help of size estimation, as in sprint planning or planning poker. And they commit to what needs to be done, so they think about what is it that we can get done within a particular time box. And that also pulls on these original business functions from many aspects. Software developers are also engineering managers, software developers, of course, and quality assurance engineers. All of this comes together in the Scrum software developer. So they also must be highly capable people, which is one of the criticisms, perhaps, of Scrum, because people are not born equal. Some are more capable than others. And it's not like everyone would be able to do everything at once. What do? Well, they plan when they go into a sprint planning session with a product owner, they do the actual development, they perform quality assurance. They are responsible for testing itself. Wow. And finally, there is the Scrum Master, the person who is responsible for process improvement, for making sure that any non-technical obstacles called impediments on the way get removed from the way, so that the team can perform to the fullest. Traditionally, that's been the job of the engineering manager. Process improvement is something what a traditional engineering manager does. And in many ways, even if you have a Scrum Master, there will still be an engineering manager who maybe delegates all the work to an empowered agile team, but it's still the engineering manager who watches over it and will want to improve the processes, will want to remove impediments. So while Scrum doesn't talk about engineering managers in a specific company or organization, there will probably be some, and they will definitely be talking to the Scrum Masters as to how process improvement could take place. Scrum Masters facilitate some of the activities in Scrum, most notably the retrospective. So they take note of non-technical problems in the impediments backlog. They work on it, they try to improve processes. That's the narrow idea of a Scrum Master. There's many more things to be said, but this increasingly falls into the purview of what's being called agile coaches and goes beyond what, in the narrow sense, the Scrum Master does. So here you can see how traditional terms come into play, because inside companies you have an organizational hierarchy, so-called line reporting, and there you have a product manager who collaborates with the engineering manager, and the engineering managers are the software developers who report to them. So what I mostly see in companies is that maybe the PM, if it's a strategic PM, they just collaborate again with the engineering manager, but if they have junior technical product managers, then they will become product owners for the software developers, and the engineering manager will leave the software developers alone. Their life in some sense actually gets easier, because Scrum lets the product owner, the technical product manager, and the software developers, then the software developers in the Scrum team, coordinate their work themselves. The engineering manager listens in, tries to empower the team to make the right decisions, and maybe collaborates with the Scrum Master to help improve processes. But engineering managers in this setup get much more hands-off. Not shown here might be CDOs or chief CTOs or chief software architects who will try to impose some requirements on architecture, non-functional requirements, and will have to influence the software developers to maybe stick to the platform they are all using, and so forth. So the core activities of Scrum you already know, but let me summarize them here. Scrum is structured into sprints, and in a sprint in sequence we have planning, execution, review, and release, and retrospective. Highly structured, little slack, much more high discipline than plan-driven software development. Most notably, this pattern, the sprint structure applied over and over again, defines feedback points. That's the good thing about it. There's exactly well known when you get feedback, and you can use that feedback to readjust your course, and it won't be 2 years from now, it will be 2 weeks from now. So much better. So a sprint then leads to a particular work week or 2 work weeks, where the sprint starts with planning, usually in the middle of the week, and ends the day before the middle of the week with review, release, and retrospective. Why middle of the week? Well, what you learned in review, release, retrospective, you don't want to forget it over the weekend, hence you shouldn't end on a Friday, but rather end on a Tuesday, so that on a Wednesday morning it's all still fresh as you plan the new sprint and start it. During the course of the sprint, you have your daily coordination meetings, the daily Scrum, and you have other meetings like the product owner meeting a senior developer to prepare the backlog for the next sprint planning preparation, for the next sprint planning meeting, and so forth. What the product owner wants to know is, how difficult are these features I put into the product backlog? Is that enough? And so forth. Do I need to break them down further? And then each day there are these 3 core activities: product management, software development, and process improvement by product owner, software developer, and Scrum Master. So the key events, the key activities are sprint planning, by which you start the sprint, and that's where you define which functionalities. I'll explain that in more detail in the upcoming lectures, but which part of the product backlog, so the most highly prioritized part, but how much of that does the team commit to developing in the upcoming sprint. Everyone's involved, everyone's got to be there, and everyone has a part to play. The product owner explains what it is people should be doing. Software developers estimate how much effort it is and how many of the top ranked features they can actually do. And the Scrum Master observes team dynamics, thinks about process improvement. After planning follows execution. So people are working in their work streams. The product owner helps developers understand what it is they should be doing and works on their own artifacts. The product backlog comes up with new features and so forth. The software developers do the actual software development, pick stuff from the sprint backlog, then realize them and so forth. And the Scrum Master works on problems or works on resolving any impediments that had been noted. Come next sprint preparation. The product owner talks to senior developers, as mentioned, to get the product backlog in shape. The product backlog, again, is where all the features are. The product owner is responsible for it, but they may not be able to reasonably estimate how much time each costs and whether it's perhaps too big for a sprint. So they go through the list with a senior developer and learn possibly what needs fixing up. This does not preclude the actual planning. That is still done in the sprint planning meeting, but it's helpful to the product owner to get the necessary early feedback from a developer so that the sprint planning meeting does not crash because the product owner came up with improbable, impossible features to do. Then you close the sprint with the review, where you go over the work you did and did it match the requirements and were the requirements thereby successfully finished or not, and you sign off on it. Then in total you sign off on the release, the sprint release, maybe project or product release at a project or product release point in time, and then in the retrospective you review your process and look at how you could possibly improve it. So that was that rundown of Scrum by the three main roles and how they combine the traditional business functions. Over the course of the next lectures, I will turn to product owner first, software developer next. So product management, engineering management, software development, and quality assurance, again, how it is mapped into Scrum. And I will see you there. Have fun. Happy hacking. Until then, bye.